That's all we want to hear, trying to figure out what we want to actually working. Oh, yeah. Right. Now I have all these quarters. 6 million. Oh, you do. Last day, they moved up my eye in one couple days. And it turns out when you wear contacts, if you take them out, don't like make sure your eye is what you pour in, you can heal your eye. So that's kind of, yeah. They work on a little bit. Yeah, this weekly I'm really happy about. So it's like a background image that just goes horizontally forever. It just rotates and then. It's like it's not really even done still, but barely had time to do anything, but like you put it in, it takes you, so it's doing a lot of rings, and I just use the I think all stupid images, we got like. Lava, copper, pizza or whatever. And then go back to the home page, do cold drinks, and cold drinks. Stay with the second one. And I still gotta do the nav thing, I'm thinking it's hard, and I'm gonna find out. That's the problem. But. And effective for a figure out the three.
Okay, peeps on the call, can you hear me okay? Cool, okay. All right, welcome everybody, happy Saturday. Hope you're ready to do some JavaScript. Cool, okay. So we went pretty fast first class, but not as fast as I expected. So we have some stuff to wrap up from then. So I was talking about like the two, oh, actually I need to turn this AC off. So I was talking about kind of the two main areas of focus for JavaScript in terms of the responsibilities that it can handle. Does anybody remember what those were? There's like two categories of things JavaScript, oh, that's so much better. Two categories of things JavaScript handles that I was talking about last class. Does anybody remember?
Events on the page.
Yeah, so like responding to like attaching events to things and responding to when those events happen.
Okay.
So what are some examples of that?
On with or whatever, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Listeners report clicks.
Yeah. That's like the most common thing is like on click. You'll do, that's like the main thing you'll be doing. There's also like on change, like if someone's typing in an input, you can have something every time they type, you can fire an event. There's like so many that we saw that like there was like mouse down, mouse up. There's also like keyboard events, like you can obviously you can respond to when they do like keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, so that's one category of JavaScript is okay. Let's attach to and handle user interaction with the website. And what was the other category?
Was it, I'm not for sure, was it like personalizing the page for each user, like storing their user data? It's basically using like cache cookies, stuff like that.
Yeah, so but specifically taking that information, taking dynamic information and then doing what with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, changing the page.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can like query the page, which you need like, so we can ask for elements on the page. So we can like find an element by ID. You can also do it by like, there's a bunch of ways you can query the page. You can say, give me every P tag, give me every tag with this class on it. But often we're doing, give me this by ID, find this thing by ID. So you need to do that for both categories. But then often once you have something in hand, you are trying to change the page. So you're like trying to inject information, or you're trying to just like add a whole new tag that's not on the page at all, which we'll see an example of that today. So we only really covered the first category. I want to cover the second category today. So, and then we'll kind of have a full sort of picture of what we can do with JavaScript. Though there's a lot, there's an infinite number of things you can do. But kind of the main focus of what we're going to be learning for this module. So the other thing we didn't get to is connecting JavaScript to HTML in like the normal way that you would do it. We were just doing a script tag directly in the HTML. So let's actually, so I'm going to copy where we left off from day one. Can you guys see this okay back there? Okay.
Cut this layers. This is the Clorox.
Yeah, I love that.
So, okay, I have this index HTML and style CSS from last class. I'm just going to copy those over to day 2. Morning. And then I will open this with live server. By the way, has anybody tried Arc browser yet?
I heard you talking about it, but.
So it's amazing. It's
Why do you
good.
switch?
Because they like fix every issue I have with browsers that everybody else has, which is like you constantly have way too many tabs open. I mean, that's the main thing. And so like they have like workspaces and then they just auto close tabs after 24 hours,
I don't know.
which is incredible. But you can find them. It has like a full history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, keep it on Chrome, because it just default.
Yeah. Okay. So I have this page from last class, and we left off with being able to click. Nothing's happening, but we had that like click handler, right? So if I have JavaScript on a page and I want to make sure it's like running or happening, what do I need to open or look at to see that? Yeah, the console. And so there's like Command Option J is typically what I'm pressing to open that. And then I'll just open the dev tools and go straight to the console tab. Let me zoom in on that.
Command Option J launches the live server.
No, that's.
Oh, does it?
console.
It might.
Oh,
That's the VS Code shortcut, but then the like console on the web browser, just Command Option J, yeah. Okay, so we have this stuff that we saw last time. We're getting, okay, coders printed. I'm not sure why that's happening. I can't remember what we did to make that happen. Oh yeah, we just console.logged a variable that we had. We had this current position stuff that is still not working because this browser is denying its ability to know where I am, which is kind of nice. And then we have the document get element by ID. User icon, and then I console logged the result of getting that, which is this like this like JavaScript representation of an element on the page, which has like a bunch of properties and a bunch of methods that we can call to do things with that element. And then one of those things that I can do is add an event listener to that element specifically. And that event listener is for when they click. And so every time we were clicking, we were getting this console log, I was clicked. Now, there's a lot of syntax that you don't understand quite yet. You won't get to it until the homework for next Saturday. But like all this stuff that's happening here is like quite a bit that you know, if you haven't done any JavaScript before, you shouldn't understand quite yet. So that's okay. But what this is doing is like, we have an event listener and like you open the page and at any moment you may decide to click. And so there's like just the lifetime of the page. There's this event that could or could not happen based off whatever the user does. And so there has to be a way to say, okay, when that event happens, I want you to do something. And so this here, this kind of like parenthesis, arrow, curly brace, you know, a line of JavaScript console log, all of that is called a function. And a function is a way for you to basically name like lines of JavaScript and call them at any point. And so we're saying, hey, here's what I want you to do whenever they click. And that's like the way that you do that in JavaScript. And in every programming language has functions. It's a very common thing. So we'll learn more about those later. But that's what's happening there. Okay, so if we wanted to move all of this outside of the HTML, so we're not doing React, we're doing the old school programming. And in the old school programming, we like to have our HTML and our CSS and our JavaScript split up. So how do I go about doing that?
Next.js file.
Sure, yeah. So we'll add another file here. Index.js. We can then just move all of this code. So everything inside the script tag, we can just move over to the index.js. And then I'll go back here. I'll just delete this script tag. And okay, so we've moved the JavaScript, but if I go to the browser now and I look at the console, what would you guys expect to see? Nothing. Yeah, because it's not linked yet. So it's just like if we moved our CSS to another CSS file and never actually linked the style sheet. So does anybody know? I honestly don't, because I never do this. Does anybody know the syntax for attaching a script tag or attaching a script to HTML?
I think it's the script tags, but in the opening script tag, you put source equals index.js, I think.
Yep, sounds right to me. Okay, so let's go back and you can clear the console with this little button here. And then I'm just going to reload the page and we're back to where we were before. So same, everything's working exactly the same. We've just sort of separated the code a little bit. And then if I click, scoot this over. I'm getting that. I was clicked still. Okay, cool. So in your guys's homework, you learned about the main things I want to talk about today were the stuff you did with strings. So there's all this like making strings, but then like injecting different content into the string, like combining strings. And then we also learned about arrays. So there's this pretty cool, it's actually, I mean, people tell you not to use it because it's like really, like, and you've probably dealt with a website that does it, where it prompts you, like where it just like stops the page and you get this like prompt. So you're not supposed to use it. It's like a horrible user experience, but it's actually like a very simple way to get input from the user with the current knowledge that we have. So normally you would want to use an input, but hooking up a form and an input is a little bit more advanced for where we are today. So prompt is this really useful way to get input from the user. And so Oh, by the way, so I have GitHub Copilot, which is like this chat GPT generator thing. So that's what all the, it's gonna sometimes recommend things that are great and sometimes just utter nonsense. So that's what this is. I have no idea why it's doing that. But what we can do is we can say var user input equals prompt. And then you see, it's like to ask, it's already telling me what I should put in here. That's not what I want, but it's useful. So VS Code is going to do this as for you, where when you're doing stuff in JavaScript, it's going to give you what's called the type definition of the thing you're dealing with. We saw this with HTML, like when you were doing class tags and stuff like that, it would like tell you what was valid CSS often. And so when you're doing JavaScript, it's also trying to be helpful. It's trying to tell you, like, if you're using a click handler, it would probably, it'll try to tell you like what the structure of that function is in terms of how you should use it. And so that's what this is. So prompt is a API provided by the browser. And you call it like we did our other methods where we use this parenthesis. And then it's telling us that there's two parameters. Again, this is like, I'm talking about functions. You guys haven't quite learned functions yet, but there's just like no way to do anything without them. So we're just kind of hand waving over them at the moment. But the first thing we're supposed to pass to prompt is the message. And the message is what the user will see, like when they get the prompt. And so we put that inside strings, and it's actually what is your name is what I want. So that's incredible. And so that's it. So we can basically, with just this one line of code, whenever they open our web browser, they will get this prompt. It'll say, what is your name? They can then type in whatever they want, whatever they type in and then hit submit with, we will receive in this variable user input. So we're assigning the result of running prompt to that variable. And in this case, that will just be a string. So I'm going to go ahead and console log user input. Okay. So you can see this is that horrible thing. Like no sites do this anymore, but you definitely had this happen to you before, where it just like completely stops the website and has this prompt. This is different than like a modal. Like you've probably seen like a modal on a website, but those you can like close. Like I can't do anything. I have to do this prompt. So yeah, what is my name? So I can type that in. I can hit OK. You can see like there was no website yet. It had like blocked the whole page from showing up. And that's another reason why you're not supposed to use prompt, because it just like blocks everything else from happening and just waits till you get to the prompt. But you can see it that we did log my name there. So that did show up. So we really quickly and easily got input from the user that we can now do something with, which is pretty cool. Okay. So we have this user input, which is a string. And then perhaps we could get some more input from them. So maybe we rename this variable to user name. And then we can just prompt again for more information. So we could do user age. So we can say, you know, what is your name? What is your age? Okay. So first it prompts us for name. I'll give it my name. And now it prompts us again for age. So I'll give it my age. And I didn't console log age, but we have it in that variable, user age. Okay, so one thing we may do with this information is have a greeting, or like if you're on a website and you're like logging in for the first time and you're at the like homepage, like often it's like, welcome, Zach. And things like that. So we're just like crafting a message for the user that's unique to their, typically you're logging in and then it knows your name, whereas we're, you know, asking for it, but you can imagine that we're actually logging in this case. So this is a perfect example of where you would do that string concatenation stuff that you learned in your homework, which is you've got two variables that have somebody's name that's dynamic. It's based off, their login, but then you want to craft a message around those variables. So if I wanted to say, hey, Zach, welcome, you're 4 or whatever I typed in, for some reason I'm telling them how old they are. How would I do that here? And for now, we're just going to console log it. So how do I craft that? So I want a variable called message, that has that message. How would I do that here? Oh, gosh darn it. We're going to have to turn this off.
They even do like hello plus. Plus yeah. What is that there?
Yeah. So have you guys heard of GitHub Copilot before?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Okay. At some point, you all should probably use it, but before you know anything, it's going to be problematic because it often generates things that you have to fix. So if you just like let it go, it's probably just going to be worse at this point. But I think like eventually, once you feel like you kind of have an understanding, it's definitely helpful.
Yeah, it's good for when you're stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just can't like blindly accept what it's saying. Yeah. It's the same thing you'll hear people say with Stack Overflow. Like if you just copy and paste a result from Stack Overflow and don't understand it, that's also problematic. Yeah. So I do encourage it, but I just want to tamper expectations with it. Okay, so so what it generated was more advanced than what you guys know at this point.
Mhm.
So based off what your homework, who knows how to craft this message?
And just put in quotes like hello and then space at the end, put space, and then plus username.
So why did you want to put a space here?
Just so that it has a space, or you could do plus and then a white space if you wanted to, but
Mhm.
it's just more work.
Yep.
So in this case, hello, and then username, because that's just gonna be exactly the type,
Hmm.
and then plus, I don't know, I guess you are. Or space,
Yeah.
You are, and then their age.
Yep. And I would probably do, I don't know, maybe
You
a
can-
comma or something.
Yeah, that,
Yep. And then,
4 years old.
yep. Okay. So what we're doing here with this plus is string concatenation, which is just like combining strings into one string. If this variable username was not a string and was a number, plus means something different,
Mhm.
right? So depending on what type you have, plus is going to act differently. And then JavaScript is this what's called a dynamic language. So it will if you're doing, so normally if you're doing something, you want to know what the type is, and you don't necessarily want to mix the types. Like you should, if you're doing something with a number, you're typically doing an operation with another number, but sometimes maybe that's not the type that you're dealing with. And so it has all these rules for when you do stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense, it'll like cast things. So if you try to do like string plus a number, it will just cast the number to a string and then do like what you would think it would do if like, so if you have like, so like 6 is a number, right? So plus 2 does math, but you can have 6 inside a string by just wrapping it in quotes, right?
And then it's just a number.
Yeah, so 6 plus 2 like this, it actually, well, that's interesting. So in this case, no, sorry, no, that's not 8. So in this case, it's just saying, okay, I'm going to turn 2 into a string and then do 6 plus 2 string concatenation, not math. So that's why we got 62. For a second, I was like, did it do math? But yeah, so there's a lot of things. What's the other, did you guys see? No, I think strings and numbers all we've seen so far. There's other types. We talked about undefined. We talked about null. So like, and nan, so like, what about this? It's already showing you the
Oh,
answer.
there you go.
Yeah.
See?
But so it's going to try to do whatever you ask often. And so there's a ton of articles about all the hilarious things that JavaScript does. So just keep that in mind that like certain things are dependent on the types that you're doing it with.
I think it's
Yeah.
worth mentioning that like in other languages like C++ or Java, where you have to specify like, this is an integer, this is a string
Yeah.
beforehand, whereas this
Yeah.
is kind of just going off your input, so.
Yeah.
If you don't know exactly what it is beforehand, then you're gonna be surprised by some weirdness.
And so that's where somebody mentioned TypeScript, I think before, like there is a version of JavaScript that is typed, that is static. But that's not what we're learning in this whole cohort. Like, we're not going to be doing any TypeScript. It's a more advanced topic. Okay, great. So we did craft the message correctly. And so we can, for now, just make sure that we did that and console log the message. So what is her name? Zach Mays. What is her age? 6. And then we see log to the console here. Hello, Zach Mays, you are 6. So great, proper message. Logging that to the console, though, not so useful for a non-developer that's using your website. So if we wanted to get that message on this page, that's something that we can do with JavaScript. Okay. So typically, if you're doing something like that, like you're trying to inject a message into the page somewhere, you will create like a slot or a spot for that to exist in your HTML. So like that message is going to be there. You want it to be there. And so we need to sort of like create like a structure for us to then attach to and add that message to in the page. Okay. So we might want that just like right here, and we might want that to be like an H1 or something like that. Okay. So let's go to our HTML. We've got our tag container and all our tags, and then probably just right underneath that, we can add our message. So we could do, just to start simple, we could just do H1, and then we'll add ID equals message. Might do a more specific name at some point, but this is fine for now. And then it doesn't have anything in it. It's just going to be empty because we're going to dynamically inject the content into it. Okay, so we'll go back to our index.js. So we have the message. And so one thing we can do now is grab that H1. How do I do that?
Make a variable that's called like arg1 or whatever. Then you do the document, get on the ID.
Good. And then message was the name of that ID that we used. Okay. All right, so we want to use documentation to figure out how to do this. So you could search on Google how to change the text content of an H1 tag, or how to update a tag or something like that. Like if you don't know how to do this, you would just Google it. So we can do that. Let's see, like it's
Hold you hostage.
yeah. So there's a few things with W3, Stack Overflow are all good options. I usually like finding MDN, but we're not. And so we can check out Stack Overflow real quick. Okay, and they said, for modern browsers, you should use this document.getElement by ID, which is what we already have done. And then just right on that, you can say the text content of this should equal whatever you want it to equal. Okay. So text content in this case is a property. And so before we did like add event listener. So we did, dot add event listener, but that was a method that we like called, we like did the parenthesis thing. In this case, this is just a property that we're setting a value to. so there's a text content property that just hosts what the text content is of the thing, and we can just mutate it, just like we would change a variable. Like if we had a variable and wanted to set it to something new, we would do equals. That's exactly what's happening here. Okay. So we'll go back here. We've got H1 message tag. So we'll do H1 message tag. And then what do you guys think?
Message. Text content.
Yeah, the text content equals message. Good. So go back to our page. Okay, what is your name? What's your age? Pretty cool.
You change it every time.
Yeah, I'm 33. Yeah.
We'll get there
It's
eventually.
not, yeah. Yeah. So that's cool, right? So we may want that to be centered. We may want, all sorts of styling and stuff like that. So that can still be the responsibility of the HTML and the CSS. Like we can still do all that. The H1 is going to be empty until our JavaScript injects it, but you don't have to do all the styling and stuff like that in JavaScript. We just need to do the dynamic content. Yeah. Okay, so there was some other things you guys learned about with strings. So we are assuming that someone's going to type in their first and last name with a space between them. That's what I've been doing. There's nothing requiring the user to do that. They could not do that, but let's assume that that's what they're going to do. If we were using an input, we could validate that. So you could say, please type in your full name. And then if they hit submit, you would often get like a red message that says, hey, we expected your full name with, with a space in between your first and last name. So that's the kind of stuff you have to do to get to a fully production ready system, is like validate the form and give them errors and stuff like that. But for simplicity, we're just assuming that's what they'll do, right? So imagine that we wanted to, so this like prompt where I'm asking for their name, sort of like, let's just assume that's like logging in. So they've logged in, they get this message. Maybe we also want to update this avatar to have normally their picture, but in the absence of a picture, you would do like the initial thing. You would do like ZM for me, right? So that's another thing that you guys learned about is like modifying strings, or like getting different positions in the string out of it. So that's one thing that we can do. So if I've got username, which we're assuming is first and last name. Actually, are you guys going to be able to do this? I'm gonna have to show you like a method that we would use to get this done, but let's start with just the first name. So we have username. If we want var first name initial equals, so we've got username. How do I grab the first name initial from the string? So username is going to be that string.
Maybe just bracket 0, bracket to get the 0.
Yeah. So we have this syntax that they showed to us, which was use the bracket, which is like the same, like when you're making an array, you also use bracket. But in this case, like username is a string. And so when we use bracket on a string, it's accessing particular indexes within the string.
If I remember right, a string really is just, at least this is how I was taught, is a string is basically just an array of characters, just a bunch of characters all kind of put in a big row.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, and then everything is zero-based index, which takes a while to get used to. So the first element is 0. The second element is 1. There's like when they were doing like really old computers and everything was like binary, like that's why they started with zero-based index, and it's just, we still do it to this day.
We have other stuff that starts from 1, like methods and things that just do it anyway, so you have to kind of fight with that sometimes.
You're saying some methods do use 1?
Yeah, so I'm trying to, like, there was one, the example right now, but sometimes it starts from 1, so you have to do like -1 or whatever, just to get the proper result. Sometimes you find it every time, but it's not.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll see, oh, you're talking about like length -1?
Yeah, like stuff.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
because, well, the length is not zero-based index, is how long it is. But if you want to get the last element of something,
Yeah, so
then you have to do length minus one,
You have to like.
because
break
it's,
space it.
yeah, you're,
It's
yeah.
not-
Okay, so we got the initial. In this case, so this works. So we'll have Z if I type in Zach Mays. Now getting the last initial is a little more complicated. So like, we don't know how long their name's gonna be. But we do know that there will be a space. But like, you guys don't know quite yet with the tools you have at your hands, how to find a space in a string, but you can. Like, there's certainly a way to do that. So there's a few things we could do. We could ask for where the space is in the string, and it'll tell us, like, there's a method we can use where we can ask for it to tell us that, and it'll say it's at position 6 or 5 or 7 or wherever it is. And then if you knew where the space is, how would you then pull out the first initial of the last name?
Just get the next one, +1.
Yeah, just +1, right? Okay,
Unless I did 2 spaces.
that would be a problem.
Yeah, no, that.
That would be bad. Yeah. But we're assuming you didn't do that. Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying is, like, you would do input validation. So that's another thing, like, and what you do for that is there's a way to say, does this input match the format that I want? Like, and you can, there's a thing called regex that will like do this crazy matching thing. And you can say, is there some characters and then a space and then some more characters? Yes or no? And if it says no, you can say, hey, you didn't properly type in your first and last name. Yeah. Okay, so we can do var space position equals username dot index of. Okay, so this is the method. So username is our string, and then there's a method on strings called index of. And it's pretty nice. You can read, returns the position of the first occurrence of a substring meaning like whatever character you want to find. So so that's the first parameter is the search string, which is space. We want to find the space. So this is going to return to us where the space is. So we get that. So assuming that I did that correctly, we would then do var last name initial equals, and what do I do here?
+1.
Give me the full code that I need to write here.
Username, open bracket,
Oh, done, okay.
space position, +1.
Good. So, yeah, a lot happening here, right? So this, if you're not familiar with programming languages like this, like, oh, I can just like do code inside the brackets and like, maybe that's like kind of wild. But there's like a particular like order of evaluation that the language will do. And so when it gets to this line 30, it's going to say, okay, well, we're assigning something to a variable. So I'm going to make a slot for this variable, and then I'm going to evaluate the right side of the assignment and assign that to the variable. So, okay, I've got the slot. Now I'm going to evaluate the right side. Oh, before I can evaluate this, I need to evaluate the stuff inside the brackets. So this space position +1. Oh, I need to look up what is in space position. Okay, space position is 5. Okay, now I can do 5 + 1. We have 6. And then so now it's like username with brackets 6. And then, oh, now I just need to look up what's in username and then get the 6th element from that based on that position, and then return that, and then it gets that, and then it assigns that to the variable. So do you remember like when you were learning math and you had like a formula and you had to like evaluate it line by line and like substitute everything? It's very similar to what's happening in the program. Like you could take this and do that same like show your work step-by-step evaluation of it. And you'll start to understand the order it's going to attack everything. No. Okay, so we can see if we did this correctly. So now instead of console logging the full username, let's console log the first name initial, and then on the next line, let's console log the last name initial. And go back to here, fill out our prompt correctly. And yeah, so we have Z and then M logged. So we did that correctly, which usually doesn't happen the first time. Usually something goes wrong. Okay, so now we have that. Now we could take first name initial, last name initial, concatenate those together, and then we've got our avatar string, and we could then stick that up here. If we wanted to. Okay. So to do that, we need to go back to our HTML. Here's our user icon thing. I'm just going to put, I'm not going to try and like make it look the way it would normally look. I'm just going to put it like a P tag here or something, and just put those letters in there. I am not good at making things look good, so I will not do that. I'm here to teach you cold hard logic. So we're going to do a P tag, and we're going to just follow the exact same strategy we did before to be able to inject the content. So what was that? What did we need to add to that H1 to be able to attach content to it? Yeah, so we'll do ID, and this would be like avatar string, perhaps. Actually, we should follow the, I think that's the correct format for the IDs. Yeah. So that's good. That's enough for now. And then we'll go back to our JS. And then in the spot where we have both those things, well, we have to do it after the prompt. Yeah, okay, so this is after that. Okay, so yeah, we can do var avatar string tag equals document dot get element by ID. That was avatar string, and then avatar string tag dot what? Text content equals, and we will do first name initial plus no space needed in this case, last name initial. All right. Okay, cool. Something didn't work, so that's good. Or the text is like black and we can't see it or something, right? So that's good. I like it when stuff doesn't work the first time in class, not in real life. But so let's check this area over here. So we had this div. We've got the P tag, but it looks like it doesn't have any content in it. So something about what we did didn't work. So what?
Mine has an error that says cannot see properties of null. So I don't know if that's the same problem you're having on your side.
Yeah, good. So let's look at the console. So I didn't get that error, but that sounds like you your lookup, like this document.get element by ID, if it doesn't find anything, what do you think it returns? Like if there is no tag with that ID on the page, what is it going to return?
No.
No, yeah. So if you console log avatar string tag and go back to the page. I'm guessing in your case, that is giving back null, like you either, like the avatar string.
It's there, yeah, it's there.
I forgot to put
I-
parentheses around my ID, so I figured
Yeah.
out what I roll.
Yeah,
Mine works now.
yeah. So actually what happened was I had, like the prompts are like blocking the page from refreshing. So like I had to cancel, refresh. And I just, so I was entering that on an old version of the page is what must have been happening in that case. So it really did work the first time. Okay, so yeah, like that is what you would normally see. Like that is exactly what people, like when you log in, they're getting your information from like a database, but they're injecting it in the same way. Well, if they didn't have React, if they were doing it the old way. But React is doing that for you. React is like a syntactical sugar, which is like a nicer way to do something, a cleaner way to do something, but it's still doing the same thing under the hood.
And I'm excited for that when we finally
Yeah.
get to it.
Yeah, sorry, I'll stop
No, I
talking
you're
about it.
hyping it
Yeah.
up.
Okay. Let me check my agenda real quick. Okay, so the last thing before we take a break that I want to do is we have our click of that when we click. And we're not doing anything currently. It just says I was clicked. So what I want to do is we're going to, underneath message, we're going to say, this is just sort of arbitrary. It's not like a good use case, but we're going to add a button. And we're going to have the content of the button say hello. And we're going to put that above the H1. Okay, and then just like everything else, we're adding IDs too because we want to interact with them. So we're going to do button ID equals, say, hello button. Okay, we're going to go back to our page. I'm going to just comment out the age prompt because I'm sick of giving it that. And then we're going to comment out our automatic generation of the message on the page. Okay. All right, so we have that button. And so I want to get the button. So I'll do var, what did I call that? Var say hello button equals document.get element by ID, say hello button. Okay. And then I want my click handler to be on the button. So when you click the button, that's when we want to add a click handler. So does anybody remember how I do that? Say hello button, add event listener. And then this parameter is, you can see it, I don't think it listed them on when we were on Zoom on Wednesday, but here's all the options. There's a ton, like just so many. For example, blur is a pretty good one. Blur is like when you click out of or into or out of input, which is often helpful. Like, because you don't want to run validation until they click out of the input that they're typing in, because it's really annoying if you just immediately give them red. But yeah, we want to click. And then here's this, stuff you don't know quite yet, but here's the syntax for attaching code that's going to run this, like the same code is going to run every time they click the button. And so we're like giving it the code that we want it to run.
Does parentheses just like, is that shorthand represent like a function that's gonna be in there? Or?
Yeah, so this is called an arrow function. It's a shorthand syntax for a function.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very confusing before.
Yeah, so you could, yeah, I'm doing this just because you guys haven't learned it yet, so it doesn't matter that much, but when you do learn it, it will look like this. This is called an anonymous function, which is another advanced thing. So when you actually do it in the next few weeks, it would look like this. You would make a function called click handler. And then we would write our code there, and then we would, yeah, pass it here.
Is there a reason you're using single quotes instead of double quotes?
No, yeah, it's like you can use either one. So double quotes and single quotes are basically identical. And you can, if you're doing strings, you can pretty much use them
The
interchangeably.
only difference really is when you have to use escape characters, right? Like if you do quotes or.
Well, yeah, so if you use double quotes, then you can use single quotes inside the string without escaping it. But if you need a double quote inside your string, then you can do single quotes. Usually you'll get to a dev shop and they will have like preferences. And you just follow whatever the dev shop preferences. And I don't even choose, like whenever I save, if I used what my dev shop doesn't want to use, it'll just automatically change it. Yeah, there's all these things called formatters, which you guys have Prettier installed, right? So yeah, in your preferences for Prettier, you just say, I want to use double quotes or I want to use single quotes, and it'll just rewrite it for you if you use the wrong one.
And does it do the escape characters too and everything to make sure that it still works right? So like if you have quotes inside your quotes, is it gonna?
No, you have to,
Okay.
it's not that smart, yeah.
Should.
Okay. So again, this is syntax you don't understand, but I'm defining what I want to do on click here and from line 40 to 42. I'm like, hey, this is the thing I want to run whenever they click, and then I'm passing it to this add event listener. So this kind of reads a little bit better this way, actually, I think, because you're saying, hey, for the say hello button, I want to add an event listener for when they click, and here's the thing I want you to do when they click. And the thing that I want you to do when they click is this named function click handler, and I'm going to write the code for what I want to do inside the body of that function. Again, you don't have to understand this yet. You haven't had this in your homework yet.
This makes more sense than the parentheses.
Yeah,
I think this, yes, like you said, I think it reads a little better. Just
Yeah.
At a glance.
yeah. Okay, let's just make sure it's working. You don't want to necessarily code a ton of stuff before verifying that it's working. And so like, this is a good stopping point to make sure everything's hooked up correctly. So we'll just console.log clicked again, like we did before, just to make sure it's working. So I'll save that. I need to go back to the browser and cancel this. Now it refreshes. Now it prompts correctly. I'll do Zach Mays. That's the only thing it should ask me for. Good. Okay. So now we don't have the message on the page. We were doing that like automatically, just in our code. We were immediately adding the message. So it's empty, but we have our button, our say hello button. And then if I click that, I got clicked, so everything works correctly. Okay, so now inside the click handler, I want to add what I was doing before essentially. Which is this stuff that I commented out down here. So I'm just gonna copy it up here. And then I have to. Well, now we don't have the age, so I need to add that back. So I'm gonna move this up. Okay, just kind of a lot going on here. So, we prompt for the name, we get the first name initial, the last name initial. We then grab the avatar string and update that with the first name initial and last name initial. We then prompt for their age again, because remember, age is a part of our message. So I added that back. We generate the message. We grab the button. We don't do anything with it quite yet. We just get it. We then define this click handler, which you'll notice, like, we have this function that has this body, but then it's referencing stuff outside the function, which is fine. Like, it's using message, which we defined up here. And this, every time we click, we're going to get the message element by ID. So we could actually move that out so we don't do it every time you click. So I'm just going to move it up here. And then the click handler is just going to change the content of that H1 tag to have our message. And then we add that event listener. Okay. Zach Mays. 4, or I did 5. Okay. And then now when I click say hello, what should happen?
Each one will say hello, the name.
Yeah.
So we didn't update the page. Like, we had the information, but we didn't update the page until they clicked. It's a really kind of silly example. Like, this isn't like a common use case, but we're doing something which is cool. Is like when they click, we're then changing the page. Okay, any questions about anything so far?
Question's not necessarily on this exact thing, but I was just wondering from the homework. We used let a lot in the homework.
Mhm.
You know, good examples for that, like use cases for that, because I'd never seen it before, and they use it a lot. It seems like on the.
Yeah. Have you guys learned const yet?
Yes, they did const as well, yeah. So they did var, then they did let, and they did const, but basically anytime it's a variable that they don't want to be read-only, they use let.
Yeah, honestly, they should be using const. So const is pretty much what I use all the time. The only time you need to use var or let, which essentially means that you're allowed to change it later in the code, you can assign or reassign to it.
Yeah.
The only time you ever need to do that is when we're doing looping, which you guys haven't learned looping yet.
Mhm.
That'll come pretty much at the very end of this module, I think. And so I would actually use const. I'll start doing that at this point, just using const. Because if you look at our code, we don't ever need to, like, this H1 message tag. We want that to always be the H1 message tag. Like, we got it by ID, we assigned it to that variable, and we don't want that value to vary. We want it to stay the same. We want it to be constant. Like, if for some reason we reassigned a value, like, because this is a var, I can do H1 message tag equals 5 or 6 or undefined or null or whatever I want, right? But like, that's nonsensical. Like, why would we do that? And so there's no reason that you would expect this to be anything other than the H1 message tag. And so you can make it a const. Oh, shoot. you can make it a const. And then when I do what I'm doing on line 44, it'll get mad at me, it'll throw an error. Because like I shouldn't do that. So you can see uncaught type error assignment to constant variable. So that's why you want to use constants, because like if for some reason someone did do that, it's you don't want, like, that's not good. So yeah, I'll use const from now on, because that's what I use normally.
Let, like, used often, that was specifically, I was looking at, it, like, I'm not quite sure what the.
Yeah, so if you're going to, if you need to mutate, which you only typically need to if you're looping, then people would actually still use let. Pretty much nobody uses var.
So var is kind of like.
var is like basically gone.
Okay, gotcha.
Now you need it. You often need it for this old style.
Mhm.
Like, so var will be a global variable. Sometimes you need global variables, but in like the modern stack, like, which we're going to get to in this cohort, when we get to React, like there's almost never a reason to ever use var. So you pretty much can forget about var. You can pretty much forget about let until we get to looping and just use const. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
keep in mind that for now, var is kind of a stand-in until we get to the actual more complicated stuff later on. We'll be using it.
Yeah, I'm using it almost just for fun because I haven't typed it in so long.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Nostalgic.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, cool. Let's take a 10-minute break. And then we're gonna do some stuff with arrays, which you guys learned in the homework. And then we'll do an exercise to kind of piece all of this together. Like a shorter one, like 20 or 30 minutes, and then we'll be done. Everybody on the call still good?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Good, we're good.
Good, okay. Yeah, here, let me pull this JavaScript file up for everybody. And actually, I'll paste this in Slack real quick for everybody.
Thank you, thanks. Cause that's, yeah, you're rocking.
Yeah, the exercise, we're gonna be building on that, or we're gonna start a new file.
You'll be starting a new file for the exercise. Do you just want this like bottom piece? It's in Slack if you want to see the whole thing. But yeah, here's kind of the last thing we did.
We're back in. That went back in. I'm not saying finish it, but I spent a little bit. But the main thing I focused on was like getting put up with under, getting people to think things. That was like most of my time. Getting that, and then I also got the menu done. So I click, well, I got a half done on it. People like monitoring for everything. Yeah, I see that, generate all the pictures. Go back to home, we click on closer to groups. For the AI, maybe the state of use. Yeah, so like. Copy the copy. Copy one. So it's crazy stuff to do. Even with state of use, like, There's that, you know, talk about roll that down where you feed an image. And it just use that as like the base and kind of just color it in, but you can choose how much of all of that image. So you can basically make your own composition, tell the details of all of. And then just kind of,
Whatever.
yeah, and just put in the font that kind of is like what you're imagining. Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Like I was going to Blender. Oh, you guys, they're good. Just like. Yeah, and then a lot of those could use like real images and you could just do like, you could fill like keep out stuff you don't want to just fill it in there and do that for you. Or like what I was doing, I was going to Blender, just using like a basic gray model and blocking out scenes. And then I would just take a picture of it, go fit the view, and then you could be like, finish thing. What makes it's crazy, man. It's crazy. CSS. Oh, for that, yeah, it's just all it is CSS animation, and I just did for the position, why it prices what it's 31 and the animation is finished off, and then the X animation just forever, it's the picture's background, and so all exactly, so all the first thing I looked up was like, use the CSS code to like make all these coordinates that you're gonna generate your vector or CSS. No, I'm not doing that. I was gonna get an image bigger. That's even more easier. But it's still a vector. Just so you can do that. Yeah. Well. I think and then I spread my so that was right. I was sleeping immediately with my head down. And then I woke up and back the next day. My eye like experience. You hear this. So yeah, it's like and so we take them out. They like stick your eye, literally it's like your eye. Yeah, and so that's what's happening. And so they had to put on like a bandage contact. So I have contacted right now that it's my inscription. And then I have, you know, I they were like, you know, if you just come in to check this out, then you put an infection, your eye don't have to go. Yeah, no, it's like red. Yeah, like you like it's still a little bit of red. It's very like completely like a whole thing, like since like got it for like yeah. It didn't help that I played so I really checked my place. So I'm basically like wearing it up and I'm like headless baby. It's like but yeah, probably would have I didn't thought I worked out though, I didn't tell, but I put the VR because I don't think that would fly as well. It's just it has to yes, I would say I'm not sure if subway we would spend like subway is like someone you know. Yeah. We're just bringing yes. That's nice. This course plan be a job as you think so. You know, see my subway just they all. Yeah, I'm still debating. Let me get out of the turn.
Put whatever you want there, but like in this case, it's in there. It's real good. That's something.
Yeah, you're free Wednesday or Thursday. Free plan on going? Yeah, the house. I don't think I'm about it. Oh, yeah. Yeah. into the. I don't know. So people there, that's. And. And all, you know what, yeah, like, well, trying to work myself and stuff, more overall, instead of got it, customer service, because I think all the serious kids like should have, so. I wasn't confident enough to do for a job center. I'm like, I don't know, man, they're gonna interview me, but they're gonna ask me questions, I'm gonna be hard. But some sort of like. Is there antibacterials that we have to take care of? They're like, oh, try the anti part. My bad. Literally saying the reason why it's so bad. That is one of the things that ones. Yeah, and I haven't been using those, so I guess it worked out. I avoided that whole thing. I don't even. Can't there. Saw that there. But yeah. Yeah. Mission is. Better. Probably that's it. That's part of it. That doesn't tell me anything. That's so big. That'll give us like a thing. Oh, well. It's not really like part of that. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a small part of the base. Yes, thank you. Not so much. Thank you, though. Down the line, that will be a thing, right? Not so much. I don't remember where the bottom thing. But he worked this place.
Okay.
So, yeah. Look, a lot of the big night.
All right, so in the homework, you learned about arrays, so. if I want to make an array, so var my array equals, if I want to make an array, what is the first thing I type?
Sorry.
Yeah. And then I want to do an array of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, and then yeah, comma. And then typically people put a space, you don't have to. 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Good. We can do
Can't you also do curly bracket? Or is it just this?
curly bracket is for objects, which we'll learn about later as well. Yeah.
In the programming use that I use, your line, is it interchangeably? So you create maps and stuff, but you could also create a list with curly brackets.
Yeah, so yeah, there's like in JavaScript, there's just arrays and then objects. And like it pretty much covers every need that you have. And then often you'll do like an array with an object in it or an object that has arrays and stuff like that. Yeah. So the first array is all numbers. So it's an array of numbers. We can do an array of anything that we want, right? Normally, it's going to be an array of what's called a homogeneous type. So all numbers or all strings. So are my second array, yeah, it could be Zach, Susan, right? So an array of strings. But there's nothing stopping you from mixing it. So we can have it, you know, an array of strings and numbers, or yeah, you can put anything you want in there, but which would then make it a heterogeneous array. But you're pretty much always going to be, you're pretty much always going to be using the same type within the array. Okay, so how do I get the second element from my second array? So var second element equals, so if I want Susan from the second array, I want to assign that string to a second element, what do I do?
Use on second array bracket 1.
Second array, yep, and then bracket and 1. Yeah, good. So that's one thing we can do. If I wanted to do that, but I didn't know how many elements were in there and I just wanted the last one, how would I do that?
-1.
So I can't just, can I do that? I don't think I can do that. Other languages allow you to do this, but I don't think you can. What'd you say? Yeah, yeah. That's what I was thinking of. I don't think you can do this. It would be nice if you could. I don't knock that over. But yeah, what I was thinking of is, you know, just like how we were with the string, we were doing like complicated stuff inside the accessor to get like the first initial or last initial. Like we can do that same stuff in here. So we can put sort of anything we want in here that then would evaluate to a number for what we want to pull out in terms of the index that we want to pull out. So we can do my second array dot length. This is going to be 2. The length is 2 in this case, but there's not 3 elements. So if we said 2, that would be 0, 1, 2, the third element. But in this case, we want just the second element, which would be 1. And so we have to do this subtraction to get to that. So you'll see that a lot, -1. Okay, good. So that's you know, making an array, accessing array. You guys saw doing arrays inside of arrays. I'm not going to go through any of that. It's pretty mind-bending sometimes doing that. But yeah, hopefully we're not going to comment. That's not going to be a common thing where we're going to access stuff that way, where you're doing like, you know, get the first element and then access the second element of that, you know, where you've got like an array within arrays like that. We're not going to do that.
That like it was like, here, this is what a variable is. This is, you know, what a character is. Now go and do this crazy complicated array stuff immediately.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stuff like that's useful if you want to make like a chessboard or tic-tac-toe or
That's something
something.
that I made on Battleship.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. It's a way to like model or represent something in 2D space. Okay, good. So there was some methods that you learned about that you for arrays. Does anybody, like if I want to add an element to an array after it's already been created? So like I made this second array. And that's me and my wife, but I forgot to add my dogs to this array. So I need to do that now. So if I want to add an element to my second array, what was the method that we saw for doing that? Push, yeah. Yeah, and we were talking about mutation a second ago, like, you shouldn't mutate your variables or whatever. Oh, shoot, I'm using var.
I see you don't use the community.
I've been meaning to learn that. I'm using them and oh, look, and I had like mistyped. And now it's telling me,
Oh,
It looks right.
yeah, okay,
this was written technically
that might, oh, no, okay.
last element. Okay. Okay, so my second array is assigned an array. The const here, my second array receives this array with those two elements as what it should hold. I can still mutate that array even though it's assigned to a const, because I'm not changing what's assigned to it. That's an array. I'm changing the contents of the array. So it's slightly different. So push and a few of the other methods that you learned are all what are called mutating methods. When you call them, they change the thing that you called it on. And there's other methods on array that don't do that. And generally people prefer not to mutate things. It's just like that's mutating stuff is sort of a practice that we realized makes programs harder to reason about and understand. So we typically try not to. But it's still something you can do. So push, when we call that push, this takes as a parameter whatever we want to add to the array. So most likely, since we're doing this on my second array, we want to add strings. And I was saying I want to add my dog, so I can add, Garland Cooper. With push, often you'll be adding one element most of the time, but it allows you to add as many as you want in one fell swoop. So I can add with a comma, I can add both. I don't think that was covered in your homework. Normally it's just you're pushing one thing, but you can push more than one thing at a time. So now I'm not assigning this to anything. I'm running this and I'm not trying to capture anything because I mutated the array. Like it was changed by that line. So if I console log my second array here, and then console log the same thing there, what do you expect to see in the console when I run this?
The first one should just be Zach and Susan, next will be Paul, Zach, Susan.
Yeah, that's right. So we can verify that.
We have to refresh again.
Yeah, maybe. Yes, okay. So yeah, you can see logging to the console, and the console always tries to kind of format things nicely for you. So it's kind of giving me, that's another thing to know. Okay. Yes. Okay. So you can see it's just Zach and Susan, and then like you said, Zach, Susan, Carl, Cooper. But like the browser will like give you this ability to like interact with the stuff you log if it's a complicated thing. So an array is a complicated thing, an object's a complicated thing, an element is a complicated thing. Like it just has like a bunch of content on it. It's like got properties or methods and things like that. And so they'll try to kind of display them differently for you and let you interact with them. When you start interacting with it, it's interacting with the thing at the current moment. like whatever it is now. And so now, like I mutated it. So it's like when we logged it, it was like when you logged it, it was only those two, but now that you're looking at it, it's actually length 4 and here's everything in it. So that can actually be really confusing if you're logging stuff and you're like, it shouldn't be that whenever it was logged, but that's because it's showing it to you as it is like at the end of the program running. Okay. And actually, I think that's what this is going to tell you, this like I right here. Oh. This value was evaluated upon first expanding. It may have changed since then. That's what it's trying to tell you. Okay, cool. There was a few other methods you learned about. Does anybody remember any of them?
Shift and unshift,
Mhm.
and also pop.
Mhm. What's pop do?
Pops it off, so the last item goes away.
Is that a mutating method?
I would imagine, so yeah, it doesn't change the,
Yeah.
My professor explained it, I remember he used it to kind of, this is maybe too advanced, but he gave it as an example of like the stack. So like, you push and pump it onto the stack and a heap and all that fun stuff, so that's I remember doing it though.
Yeah. Mhm. And then what does shift do?
From the, it puts an item as the first item, if I remember right.
Actually, I can't remember. I never used that method.
Yeah.
It takes off the first element.
Didn't know shift, yeah. Removed it, that's what it's function.
Yeah, okay, so this is a mutating method that also returns something. So it mutates the array, but then it gives you what it removed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If something returns something, it's almost always so that you can then put it in a variable and do something with it. Yeah. Okay, cool. So an array is a really helpful thing to store like a grouping of items. And one obvious example I think was in the homework is like a shopping cart. So you have a shopping cart. Usually the shopping cart says how many items are in the shopping cart. So you can imagine potentially what they ask to figure out how many items in your shopping cart. Like if you have an array and you want to know how many items are in it, what do you do? Yeah, so that's literally how they would show you that. And so when you're shopping, this is an example where you probably are mutating because like your shopping cart is changing over time. It is being mutated. And so when you like click an item to add to your shopping cart, what do you imagine we might do in our code in response to clicking on a button? So there's a bunch of items on the page, imagine that you're interested in, and you click on one of them to add to shopping cart. So there's a button, right? We probably added what to the button?
Either recalculated or you would just add like a just +1 on that, either one of those.
Well, don't think about the number.
Oh, okay.
Think about the array as housing the actual items you want to buy. We'll learn about, so we'll use objects later, which is typically what you would need to do. Because like, if you think about a shopping cart, the item is like a grouping of many properties.
Yeah.
The name of the item, the SKU of the item, the price of the item. But then the shopping cart is a collection of those items. And so when we actually get to, when you learn objects, the shopping cart will be, and this is actually what people would do in the real world, an array of objects. So like the first element in the array would be the first item in your shopping cart, which would be an object that has the name and the price and the SKU of that item. Yeah. But right now we don't know objects yet. So we're just going to only store the string of just the name of the item. That's all we're going to store. So imagine we've got a bunch of items on the page and we have a button for every item and we click on one. So we've got what attached to each button. Yeah, so we have a click handler that then would push that item to our shopping cart array. Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're going to do now. And if you're going to remove an item from the shopping cart. So, you know, you're like, I'm not gonna buy this anymore. There's a delete button. So there's a button click handler for deleting. You would click it, and then what would you likely have to do to delete an item from a shopping cart?
If it's the same last item, you spell right.
Right, but if it's not, yeah. So yeah, let's imagine you've shopped a ton, you've got a bunch of stuff in there, you want to remove the fourth thing that you added, you've got 12 items.
You can opt from a certain like position, right?
Yeah,
Okay, I see. what you're
Yeah.
saying, like my array.
yeah. So remember when with the string, we were like, okay, shit, like where's the space? So we would have to, if you're deleting something, you'd have to go, okay, well, I have to find the item in the shopping cart that they want to delete somehow. In the case of our example that's simplified where we just have strings, we would just need to find that string.
Yeah.
And then, so we can do that same method, I think exists on arrays. So if we wanted to remove Cooper, which would be so sad. I think there's probably an index. Yeah. So the same method that we had on the string, there's an index of, so we could say, hey, give me the index of Cooper. And then I'm going to, what's the method we would use? So we can say, yeah, find,
Delete. So like, would you index sub and then delete that index?
how do you delete an index?
Delete dot or your array name and then the index number. And so would you put like my second array dot delete and then in like a little cube index of Cooper maybe?
I don't think delete is a method. I think there is a delete keyword like that. But I think it's,
Nuclear contents.
well, so this is where honestly, because I typically use, I typically don't mutate stuff. And so I'll use a method called filter that will like remove something based off my filter criteria, and then it'll return a new array to me. So this is like, there's a lot of stuff that I don't remember because I don't use it anymore. But so but you don't know quite yet. And so what you would do is the same thing I would do, which is remove an element from an array. Yeah, so this is so common. You are like constantly Googling. So yeah, the first thing that comes up is you can remove an element by index using splice. Yeah.
Okay,
Did you guys learn splice?
we did not, but
Okay.
yeah, it just cuts it and then stitches it
Yeah.
together.
So you can search on Google like a specific thing that you're trying to do. You can also then like just look at, so there's all these methods are called array methods. So you can search JavaScript, meaning like, what are the methods on an array available to me? And so then you can get the docs. And then, oh shoot. So all the methods are on the left side here. It says properties, length is a property. But then you can see all the methods here. So filter is the one that I would often use. But then we were just learning about, we just saw index of, so you could read the documentation of index of. And then we just learned about splice.
That's like.
Oh, sorry.
Slice existed.
Changes the contents of an array by removing or replacing existing elements and or adding new elements. So it can actually do quite a few things. To access part of an array without modifying it, see slice. So this is this like modify versus not modify concept, but we want to modify in this case. So they give you some nice examples. So they're actually using it here to insert. Oof, there's a lot going on. So we can say. So we'd find the index of, that element, and then we would say splice, give it that index, and then I think we would just have to say 1 for the delete count. Yeah, so we would just say delete 1 item starting at that index, and I think that would work. So whoever on the call was mentioning delete, there is a delete syntax. I think it's often used on objects. That's where I've seen it the most personally, but I think you might be able to use it on an array. Is this what you were talking about, the syntax here?
Yeah, I have a bunch of notes for arrays like from months back. So I was kind of flipping through it. And so I saw that if you like, you can do delete array and then index, but it deletes the index value, or like you can delete it, but the index value remains, but the value is gone. So it'll still have an index of 3, but that spot is gone.
Yeah,
Which
so
is
it's like undefined.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so
I
that's
saw that
another.
does.
Okay, cool. So that's actually, there's an interesting thing you can do, which is you're not often going to do this. I'm just showing an interesting example. So we can do const my array equals. I'm just going to put 2 strings in here. Okay. So I have my array, it's available to me. It's got 2 elements. So you can do like delete my array 0, like you said, and then now it tells me true that it did it. And so yeah, now you can see that it says empty, but that is really likely undefined. Like if you asked for it, yeah, it's undefined. You can do another really funky thing, which is you can just say like, hey, my array 500 equals test 3. And so we're saying like set the 500th element to that. And so now when we look at my array, it's like, it's huge and it just has a bunch of empty slots. That's kind of a funky thing you can do. I don't really recommend doing it, but yeah. So you could use that delete property, but typically you'll want to use splice to actually remove the element and then change the length and not have any empty slots. Yeah. So yeah, we can do const Cooper's index equals index of Cooper, and then do my second array dot splice Cooper's index 1, like we mentioned, to delete the item. Okay, so that was just a warm up to actually get to the thing we want to do, which is the shopping cart stuff. So we're going to make a const called shopping cart, and we're just going to set it to an empty array. Nothing is in our shopping cart. This is totally valid, just a length of 0 array. And then we're going to use a function just because we have to sort of do the same thing over and over. And I'm just gonna do that. So I'm gonna write a function which will be add item to cart. Okay. I'll go slow just because I know you guys don't know the syntax yet. And when I write a function, I can take in a parameter. And so I'm going to define that parameter. And that's going to be the item. Let me be more specific. This is going to be the item name. And so when someone calls this method, they're going to pass to it the name of the item. And then, so then I can reference item name. It's a variable that's going to have a string of the item name. And so what we would do is shopping cart dot push item name. Now, one line of code is not necessarily something you'd need to put into a function. But whenever someone adds an item to the cart, we're gonna have to like update the page and do a few other things. So there's gonna be more than one thing we're gonna do whenever someone clicks. So this basically is turning into our click handler whenever someone clicks an item, but we're gonna have like 5 different items that then can all share the same function for the click handler, rather than writing like a different line of writing the same code over and over again for every single one. All right, so let's go to our HTML. And let's add a few items. These are going to be very ugly items. Normally you'd do like a card that would be very pretty and you would, have the picture and all that, but we're just going to have a few buttons. So we'll have a button for our shopping cart. We might be able to buy pants. T-shirt. Hat, okay. All right, we kind of have to just brute force this. There's other cleaner ways to do this later, but for now, we're just going to add IDs for all these things. So this ID will be pants. This ID will be T-shirt, probably with a hyphen. This ID will be hat. Okay. All right, and then following the same pattern we did before, we'll do const pants equal document get element by ID pants. And then we'll do that for T-shirts. And hat. Okay, and then pants, add event listener, click. And then this is kind of complicated what's happening here. Again, you haven't learned about functions quite yet, so just copy what I'm doing. But what I'm going to do is whenever they click, I'm going to call our add item to cart method and pass it the item name. And so in this case, we want pants. So if they click the pants button, we'll call add item to cart and pass it pants as the item name. So this right here is a little complicated, but don't worry about it too much. So then we just follow this syntax. For t-shirts. And hat. Okay, so every time somebody clicks on something, add item to cart, for now, let's just log the cart so we can see stuff getting added. So I'm gonna add that into this function because I want to, every time somebody clicks, I want to see the cart again. So I need to put that in the click handler. Okay. And then at the end of all this, I'm going to console log the current, like at the beginning, I just want to see that the cart's empty, and then we'll see it change. All right. All right, cool. Imagine these are cards, you know, that have pictures and price and all that. And scoot this over. Okay, so here's our empty shopping cart. That's that log. And then can add pants. Let's see, pants in our shopping cart, t-shirt, hat. So good. It's working correctly. Now we just want to maybe have like a representation of our cart on the page for the user, so we don't have to see it in the log. So next to these buttons, or probably before the buttons or something. I mean, normally we put this like up at the top right, but I'm just going to put it next to this stuff. We can have, I'm just going to do something simple. A P. Actually, so let's do div, and then we'll have one P tag. Actually, let's do 2 spans. So one span will be your cart, like that. And then we'll have a second span that is going to have ID equals shopping cart, where we're going to inject the number of items in the cart. Okay, so we need to, just like we need to log the shopping cart in the click handler, we're gonna have to update the page every time they click something. So we're gonna do all that logic inside this add item to cart, which is why I wanted to do it inside the function. So instead of logging the shopping cart, first thing we need to do is define that element. Oh, shoot. Which is the shopping cart element. So shopping cart element equals document.get element by ID shopping cart. I think is what I called it. Yeah. And so now inside this function that is running every time they click, we can do shopping cart element dot, what is the property? For
That's-
text content.
I was reading that it should use, inner text.
It intertext is like what you can, is like the older. Like, we were looking at that on the Stack Overflow when we first looked it up.
So ChatGPT said.
ChatGPT is not me, okay? It's not a fully intelligent human quite yet.
Yeah. it's tables.
And yeah, I think, yeah, so Stack Overflow, like this, oh, come on. So we search like, how do you change the text of an element? And like, this is like a really high voted accepted answer. So it's like pretty reliable. And you can see like they said, hey, for modern browsers, this is what you should use. But for like older browsers, you can do this inner HTML. What were you saying? Inner text?
Inner text,
Okay,
not inner HTML, inner text.
okay. Yeah, so I don't know like what that is. Verse text content.
It just says it's an updated way of saying text content.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to dig into there. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like this, and then at some point you're just like, screw it, like, I'm just trying to build something and it's working, and so I'm gonna move on. But there's probably a correct answer. It sounds like inner text is like more browser accepted, or sorry, text content is more browser accepted, but potentially it's giving back like additional things. So anyways, I'm not positive like which one would be more appropriate.
We could just use text.
Cool, okay. All right, so we want the text content to be the number of items in the shopping cart. How do I get that?
Shopping cart dot.
Yep. Okay. Okay, so we probably want it to say 0 to start, right? And why doesn't it say 0 at the moment?
We only did that in the function.
And that function only runs when what happens? Yeah, so I haven't clicked anything yet. So we just need to set that at some point when the page loads, right? So we'll just add it. Like we can just add it here at the bottom. We can just say, hey, let's go ahead and so we're just going to duplicate this code and just stick it down here. Okay, so now we have 0, and then as we click, we see that card updating. Cool, okay. All right, so we'll spend. You guys good to go? 30 minutes. If anybody needs to leave, that's fine. But I do have an exercise we could do for about 30 minutes and then we can leave. So And so this will kind of combine everything we've learned so far. So we're gonna start a new file, a new index.html, a new JavaScript file. You don't need any CSS unless you wanted to make it look good. But what we're gonna do is make a 99 bottles of beer on the wall generator. So here are the instructions. You're going to, and then you'll just want to, let me post everything we've done so far into Slack. And like everything that you need to complete this is like in what we've done today. So you should, like, some of the stuff is complicated, but you should just be able to copy and paste it and adapt it to what you need. And then I'll give you guys like 15 minutes. It's probably not enough time to do it, but then I'll do it. Or I could post it before Wednesday, actually, if you guys want to grind on it. I like that idea better, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll give you guys this exercise. Feel free to work on it for a bit, and we'll head out, and feel free to continue working on it before Wednesday. That's better. I like that. And then I'll give you the answer on Wednesday. So, okay, so you're going to prompt the user. So the page is going to load. It's going to be completely blank. You're going to prompt the user for where they want to start in the song. Not everybody wants to hear all 99 lines. So you could give it 10, and it would just start with 10 bottles of beer on the wall. And so you would prompt, and then after they answer the prompt, which they should type in a number, you will then print, like in on the page, just the text of the appropriate line for that. So that it would, if they type 99, it would say 99 bottles of beer on the wall. Okay. Then there will be a button, and the button would say, take one down. And they would click the button, and then it should say, take one down, pass it around, and then the appropriate next number, which would be 98 in that case, 98 bottles of beer on the wall. And then they can just keep hitting take one down. So they should be just keep clicking the button, and you should keep progressing down the game, the song. There's one thing. So everything we learned today should help with that. So there's prompt, there's a button, there's a click handler, and then there's like the string concatenation stuff. You also remember how we did the like minus in the homework for numbers? That's another thing. You need the current number, and then you would do like minus. Yeah. And then there's one other thing you need, which is in this article. So this article is, there's a create element method to create. And so far we've put elements on the page that were like there, like we had like a shell that we can inject text content into. But in this case, you actually need to, well, you could just make like a massive string that you keep mutating and then just like replace that string in the page. But I'd actually recommend just like appending additional p tags. So you can create elements and then append them to something. So you could have like a div that's going to be where all of the text is going to be, and then just append p tags to the div, meaning like just add a child to it. And so there's this create element method, and this guide shows exactly that. So you'll see, if you look at their example, they've got a div here, and then you can see them creating an element. So you can create a p tag. You could then either do text content like we've been doing so far. They do this example of doing this thing called a text node. Both of them are doing the same thing. So this code here is creating a div that has the content, hi there and greetings. And then you can see that they are appending a child to an existing element, which is this new thing that they made. So you would make a new p tag, and then you would call this append child on the div that's going to host all of the p tags. Okay. Or I'm sorry, that's not correct. It's this insert before. Well, actually, No, I think append child is what we want. Yeah, this is what you want. You want to have a div and then you would append a paragraph to that div. That's what you want to do.
Do post that in Slack as well, that. Oh, it's already there, okay, cool.
It's in the. So let me just post this. So this is in our curriculum, but
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
post it here in Slack. So feel free to tackle this for 30 minutes or so, then we'll head out and then I'll show you guys a working example on Wednesday. So lane is a property. So you don't actually need to call, so you're doing, what you're doing with those parentheses is what's called calling a function or method. But length, you don't have to call it. Yeah, exactly. It's just a property that you can access. Same thing. Prompts. Do you have any prompts? What was the name? So so you're calling text content somewhere and it's not like basically this, it might not be that one, but this is potentially null. And so it's saying like, hey, you're trying to access text content on null. That's not. So you're either just like mistyping the ID, or you don't have that element in HTML. So if you look at the HTML, it's index HTML, do you have shopping cart with the, yeah. Here. So what's wrong with that? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm very back. Fun.